welcome you to the 3 Icy Rivers room. My name is Phil Condon. I teach in the Environmental Studies program at the university, and I direct the Environmental Writing Institute, which is a annual 4 to 5 day writing conference about nature and the environment. And I'm bringing that up because the person we're here to listen to today, Alison Hawthorne Deming, is in Missoula as workshop and conference leader for the Environmental Writing Institute this year. This is the 18th year in a row that the Institute has occurred. The second year since we've moved it to the fall and overlapping with the Festival of the Book for opportunities like this reading today. And while it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce Alison Hawthorne Deming to you, but before I do that, I just want to mention a couple of things. I know a lot of faces, some people know about these, but others might not. Connected with the Environmental Writing Institute, which combines about second year graduate writing students in the EVST program and writers who are in from out of town from around the country. Connected with that is the graduate student magazine, Camus, and I'm just holding it up, so if anybody's out in the atrium later, we have the students produce this twice a year and have done so for 15 years now. And there's a table out there where you can learn more about it, see issues, buy issues, subscribe. And a real bonus for anyone who's in from out of town for the Book Fest, or here in Missoula, after the Book Fest is over, if you haven't gotten enough things literary, there's a 15th anniversary celebration party this Sunday, the 16th. And this is the poster. It's at the Camus table also. Sunday, September 16th, 2 to 6 p.m. at the Tin Spoon Vineyard up the Rattlesnake 4000 Rattlesnake Drive. You can't miss it if you go way up there. So everyone would be welcome to come out to that too. There'll be great Tin Spoon wine, and a lot of Alison Deming will be there also, along with a lot of other writers. So that's my little side plug. And now to what we're really here to do, which is I'm going to introduce Alison, and she will read to you. Alison Hawthorne Deming was born and grew up in Connecticut, and now she is a professor in creative writing at the University of Arizona in Tucson. She's published 3 nonfiction books: Temporary Homelands, The Edges of the Civilized World, and Writing the Sacred into the Real. And she's also, besides being an essayist, a poet, the author of Science and Other Poems, which was selected for the Walt Whitman Award, the Academy of American Poets, and 2 additional poetry books, The Monarchs, a poem sequence, and Genius Loci. Alison received an MFA from Vermont College, held a Stegner Fellowship at Stanford University. Her work has won numerous awards: 2 fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, fellowships from the Fine Arts Center in Provincetown, the Arizona Commission of the Arts, the Pablo Neruda Prize from Nimrod. I'm abbreviating this list. And the Bear Award in Science Writing from Creative Nonfiction magazine for her essay Poetry and Science, A View from the Divide. I think some of these titles and things that work that she's been given awards for locate her writing, in case there's anyone who hasn't already read some of her work, right on this fascinating cusp between poetry and nonfiction, between science and poetry and natural history and humanities. Her poems and essays have appeared in magazines and anthologies, including the Georgia Review, Orion, Islands, American Nature Writing, Poems on Science and Mathematics, and the Norton Book of Nature Writing, and in an upcoming issue of Camus magazine, already mentioned. She's served on the faculty of many writers' conferences, the Prague Summer Seminars, Writers at Work, Taos Summer Writers Conference, Art of the Wild, Orion's Forgotten Language Tour, the Sitka Symposium, most recently Orion's Wild Branch Writing Conference, and as I mentioned at the outset, currently, and most fortunately for us, she's in Missoula right now leading the Environmental Writing Institute. So let's please welcome Alison Hawthorne Deming.
Thanks so much, Phil. Thank you all for being here. It's always wonderful to come to Missoula and walk around among people who have the word grizz written on their chest. Think about, what does that mean? I'm going to read mostly new work today. I'm going to start by reading a few very short essays from a book in progress that is called With Animals in Mind, a Bestiary for the 21st Century. I'm really interested in the fact that I believe we still all have many experiences in which animals seem to teach us something. And I've been trying to identify some of those experiences in my life, things that aren't sentimental and aren't cute and aren't necessarily encounters with the gigantic magnificence like the grizz, and to see what these stories might tell me about our relationship with animals as we move forward in these really troubled times. So these are very short essays. They're 3 pages long. So I'll read 3 of these to start with. The first one is the most far out, literally. It's called The Rabbit on Mars, and it's the one that'll be in Best American Science and Nature Writing this year. The Rabbit on Mars. Do other animals tell jokes? Perhaps the play of young animals in which they practice what will later become life-enhancing skills, the stalk, the pounce, the thrashing, is not so unlike what human beings do in attempting to learn what they will need to survive in the future. Of course, we live and direct our lives so much in the mind, so much in the richness and folly and, yes, beauty of what our minds can create, that our play often takes the form of jokes, a linguistic version of play. One of my recent favorites was The Rabbit on Mars. In 2004, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration landed 2 rovers, research-gathering devices, on our neighboring planet, the one with soil so bloody with iron that it was named after the Roman god of war. How much more benign is our view? Let's do some geological study of the soil and find out what it's really made of, and whether any forms of life might once have inhabited the place, might, miraculous to say, have blown loose in a cosmic wind and drifted here to our spinning globe, seeding everything we know, including the great and troubling argument between religion and science. The 2 research devices are called Spirit and Opportunity, as if the project were intended at last to create a team from these opposing forces. It has been an awe-inspiring experience to watch these little emissaries of our curiosity make their journey through space and land like bouncing balls in a place so far away we cannot imagine the distance, though we can cross it, then release themselves from their protective shells in response to messages beamed from Earth. Errors in the software? No problem. New instructions are beamed from home base, and the little brain is reconfigured, the rover rolling off its platform, drilling into Martian rock, sending snapshots back home through space. The scientists and engineers have worked in a collaboration as musical and passionate as a symphony orchestra to accomplish this, and their joy is beautiful to behold. How the knowledge will be used by opportunity, if you will forgive my appropriating these names and returning them to their earth-bound meanings, remains a cautionary tale. No green-thinking poet could celebrate transforming the culture of obsessive consumerism to another planet. It is how the knowledge will be used by spirit that draws me to the curious phenomenon of the rabbit on Mars. Along with panoramic images of rusty, barren soil and rock circulating on the internet, that collective unconscious of the technological that hovers over the surface of Earth, came a fuzzy, imprecise image of an object that appears to have very long, erect, and pointed ears. It was graced with the caption, "A rabbit on Mars?" ? It is hardly the first time that human beings have projected their imaginations out into space. It isn't even the first time that the projections have taken the form of a rabbit. The Maya saw a leaping rabbit, the special pet of the moon goddess, where Americans see the man in the moon and Japanese moon gazers see a rabbit eating a rice cake. Of course, everyone got the joke. There are no Martian bunnies hopping up to welcome our team of digital explorers. It turned out the rabbit image taken by Spirit was a tatter of the protective balloon that had helped cushion the spacecraft's landing. A momentary illusion, though it struck the imagination with silly and pleasurable force. Spirit, of course, will be struck when and if science finds life on other planets. And many astronomers and evolutionary biologists agree that it is really a matter of when, not if, now that we know planets are not an entirely exceptional phenomenon in the universe, and therefore the conditions suitable for life may not be limited to those on Earth. How far we have come from War of the Worlds, as our scientific instruments have extended our eyes into far space and altered our picture of what we will find there. In the 21st century, our first conjuring of the extraterrestrial is not a mechanical warrior sent to conquer our planet, but a benign, fuzzy, harmless, and familiar creature, a vegetarian, an animal said to deliver baskets of candies to children at Easter time. Is the appeal of this image an instruction to ourselves? Can it calm us, assuage the fears that our sense of self will be, our sense of ourselves and our world will soon be sent reeling? What will it mean, even if all we find out there are microbes living in methane ice? Will our God be their God? Will life itself become our God? Will we be humbled into a greater reverence and hunger for knowledge, as some people were by the Copernican revolution? Will life become a dime a dozen happenstance to be owned, manipulated, destroyed, and devoured, with an attitude of dismissal even greater than we've accomplished here on our own gorgeous home planet? How could we know what rearrangements our spirits will undergo when such knowledge comes to us? What better guide for us, if only in play, than the animals who have been with us from the start, real and imagined, the animals who live in us as the matter of our genes and the spirit of our imaginations, who live with us as our teachers and companions and neighbors, the animals who were our first gods in the childhood of humanity. Did anybody see the internet joke? It came, you know how they are, it lasts like a flu, it's very intense for a day and then done. This is set in northern Vermont. Most of this essay is set in northern Vermont, and it's called Dog Tags. I think it has a lot of resonance in the long run when it finally lets you know what it's about. It's pretty digressive. I think it has a lot of resonance with some things that are going on now. And I suspect there may be a little bit of resonance between the culture in rural northern Vermont, where I live really close to the Canadian border, and some parts of Montana. Dog tags. Clamp the S-hook to the collar, and the dog has permission to live. If he gets lost, the person who finds him can get your address and bring him home to you. If he gets hit by a car, someone will deliver a definition for the grief you feel at the loss of his company. Every year or two, you will renew his license using pliers or a vice grip to detach the old tag and attach the new one. Then the dog will prance around the living room, shaking his head for a few moments, feeling the collar that he had forgotten he wears. You will hear him jingle in the house at night as he scratches his fleas, like he is your dog, though unlike this in that he takes no pleasure in their companionship. You will hear him stir, turn, and resettle in the night because of the metallic jingle. A stranger who once has been attacked, such a sweet dog, he would never, will be grateful for the music of dog tags that give warning before the bark or growl or baring of teeth that will trigger your startle reflex, the body's memory of a trauma the mind has suppressed. Once a person has known teeth in her flesh, the dog tags will no longer convince her that anyone owns the dog's wildness except the dog. Domestic only means he has agreed to live in the house, and we have agreed to welcome him there. Men and women wear dog tags too, to identify their bodies. In 2001, a 27-year-old man traveling in Ho Chi Minh City to scout for business opportunities found the dog tags of American soldiers hanging on a string in a back alley market, not frequented by tourists. They were for sale, 6 or 7 for $1. He was disgusted. He could not stop thinking about them. Were they real or fake? He returned to buy 620 of them and brought them home. Some of the dog tags belong to men who are still living. 30 years after leaving Vietnam, where every one of them must have left a piece of his soul, the soldiers got back their IDs. For them, too, the dog tags meant, in retrospect, permission to live. 30 years after their sons died in Vietnam, some parents got back the dog tags. One mother said she felt joy to hold them. For her, they meant identifying with her son's body, and he was real and tangible, at least in her mind, as had been the child whose back she had stroked as he fell into sleep on troubled nights. One morning in Vermont, when I lived simple and remote, visitors rare, and reminding me that the world extended beyond my house and barn and neighborhood, I picked up a hitchhiker. This was near the Canadian border, so near I had gone several times to a club the size of my living room in the eastern townships of Quebec to hear Jesse Winchester perform. The Memphis-born folk singer and draft resistor had become famous for his love song, Yankee Lady, but he could not perform in the United States without being arrested for evading his 1967 draft notice. That war was everywhere in American society, and it showed up quietly on my dirt road that morning. The hitchhiker looked about the age I then was, 24 or 25. He was bearded, scruffy, and carried a dirty backpack, the sartorial style signifying, it seemed to me then, his solidarity with resisting the trim exterior that belied America's vicious heart. To be messy and grow wild was to be truthful about the reality that our nation was a mess and the war had gone wild, a ferocity no one's tidy rhetoric could control. But appearances rarely are what they seem, and I soon realized that I had projected my own ideology on the stranger instead of learning the story that had brought him to this spot on his tattered map. I know this is beginning to sound like one of those tales we call a shaggy dog story, so much digression you can't see where you're going. I brought the man to my house for lunch, gave him homemade soup and bread. He wanted a lift a few miles down the road, and I agreed to take him. He pointed to the green area on the map, saying it looked like the biggest stretch of uninhabited forest in the vicinity, and asking me if that were true. I said yes, and pointed out the window to the cold, hollow mountains, which had been my comfort in the landscape that had taught me I belonged to something larger and older and wiser than human life. He told me he wanted to see if he could survive in the wild with nothing but his pocket knife and sleeping bag. Did he even have a sleeping bag? I remember so little of this, only that I thought he was crazy or suicidal or running from something that must have seemed to him worse than death. It was late autumn, and in that region winter brought killing cold, weeks when the morning temperature would register at 40 below. Why didn't I ask the stranger where he had come from and why? Why didn't I offer him something other than soup and a ride? What would it have been? I was afraid of him, and I wanted to protect him, and the contradiction immobilized my good intentions. After lunch, I drove him as far as a car could go on the dirt road that dead ends on a saddle of those forested mountains. "This looks good," he said. The maple trees had already lost their leaves and lay crisp with frost on the hard-packed ground. I stopped the car. "Are you sure?" I began to see that I might be helping a man to kill himself. "Yes," he said, and his eyes were sure. What was unsaid hung around us like acrid smoke. "Will you do me a favor?" he asked. "What?" He reached in his pocket and took out a set of dog tags hanging on their chain. "Put these in the nearest U.S. mailbox." I stared at him. "It's okay," he said. I took the tags. I let him out. He walked upslope into the woods. I wanted to call out to him, but what could I have said? I drove to town and put the dog tags in a mail drop at the post office. I felt as if I were committing a crime. I cannot say what his intentions were. Perhaps he'd gone AWOL and would hike north to the border for amnesty. Perhaps he died in the cold woods with not one thing on his body to identify him, wanting to be reduced to the animal because he felt himself no longer to be human. There were so many men, mostly men in those years, who were lost and could not find a way out of the arguments in their heads over what they had done or not done in the war. I felt ugly to myself, as if by handing in his tags, I was treating a man as if he meant less to me than a dog. I regret still that I did nothing more to help him. What would that have been? Send a letter to his family explaining his confident resolve? Perhaps this account is that letter. Perhaps we, every one of us who has no faith in war, are his family. I keep thinking someday a guy in the audience is going to put his hand up. It's me. I made it, but I doubt it. Well, I think we'll make a leap. Maybe I'll read one called T-Rex for a shift in tone. T-Rex. My grandson Raymond became obsessed with Tyrannosaurus Rex at about age 5. The younger of two brothers, Ray lives with an emotional intensity that can send him reeling with no apparent explanation and running outdoors for the safety of solitude, where he'll wander the pine woods behind his yard for an hour, stewing in his feelings until he has them ordered and is ready again to join the social world. It's folly to try to cajole him out of his intensities. They are part of his weather. He knows this and will one day perhaps become an artist who can describe these storms to others in a way that will make them legible both to himself and to others who are less articulate and who find themselves getting lost in emotional turbulence. The powerlessness of those moments when he can do nothing but split from family and his own social self must be frightening in a child who by definition needs the nurture of family. I suspect this volatility had something to do with his extreme affection for T-Rex. One could see a look of mischievous competence creep over his face as he began to lumber about the room, 2 fingers of each hand raised like claws, heavy-footed, predatory, incapable of language beyond a guttural reptilian hiss. He was so good at this. He would stalk along the edges of an adult conversation, and everyone present would know he was testing his small power against the great and confusing powers of the adult world. It appeared he found that small power quite sufficient to keep him in the room. He was not only a good imitator, but became, as he continued to practice his shamanism, an expert on T-Rex paleontology. When I once tried to play T-Rex back at him, raising 3 fingers in each hand into claws, he found it necessary to break out of role and coach me, his patience with my ignorance barely contained. No, Grandma, Titi only has 2 fingers, 3 toes, and 2 fingers. I had spoiled the game by being a lousy scientist. This was, in fact, not a game, but a trying on of animal power by a creature as yet uncertain of his own. Ray is now a seasoned 9-year-old, and I called him on the telephone to tell him I was writing about how important animals are to people. I asked him if he remembered how much he'd loved T-Rex when he was younger, and if he remembered why. Yeah, he said coyly, because he's the biggest and strongest and fiercest of the dinosaurs. I felt a moment of remorse that he found fierceness a desirable quality, until I recalled a list he'd once made for school when asked what were his earliest memories. 1, I would start crying every time my mom left the house. 2, I started to walk and talk. 3, I lost my first tooth and started riding a bike. 4, I went to 2nd grade. 5, the terrorist attack. I remember my own dinosaur infatuation, growing up in the post-World War II glow and denial of a heroic nation that was building its arsenal of doomsday machines, while my family rode its emotional roller coaster up happy-faced hills and down rage-roaring precipices, a madness that sent me out into the woods for solace. My dinosaur was the Diplodocus. Bigger and more slender than the Brontosaurus in my golden book, Natural History Encyclopedia, muscular, graceful, a giant that could hold a beachhead just by standing its ground, its head above the trees. My partner Malcolm, who grew up lonesome in Oklahoma because his mother was too depressed to get out of bed in the morning, and who came home from school at lunchtime to make himself a bacon sandwich and see if she was still alive, claims the Stegosaurus for his dinosaur. Why, I asked. It was very well protected. We each have our own personal dinosaur, it would appear, a monstrous version of ourselves, primitive, gargantuan, a being that completes us in our vulnerable early years. What happens to that childhood capacity to protect and instruct ourselves through imaginative identification with animals? We continue the process if we're lucky, though it does become unseemly for an adult to stalk the edges of the dining room with a galumphing gait and forefingers raised. We name athletic teams Wildcats, the Bulldogs, the Cardinals, the Grizz, though I'm not convinced these names hold much ceremonial meaning for us. Who could believe that the Cardinals stand a chance against the Wildcats? And we still play at animal identities, calling a lover vixen or stud, horsing around, or acting pig-headed. And I'll admit that recently I have been referring in private to a certain obstreperous family member as T-Rex, thereby safely ritualizing the hostility that another's nastiness might provoke in me. Dinosaurs are extinct, as we all know, so what could be a safer way to imagine ourselves as invulnerable or our antagonists as extinct forms of being when we need to be larger and more fearless than it's possible for us to be. I'll read one more of these and then a few poems. This is set in Los Angeles. It's hard to find an animal in Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles. It's called Hood River Oyster. I'm not sure when I began to notice the absence of birds. I'd come to Los Angeles for the weekend to speak about science and the Western American imagination. I lamented the split between science and religion that has widened since Darwin. I might have said that as an animist, I see nature as God. Or I might not have said this because it would have made me feel undressed in public. God is like sex, best experienced with a very small audience, or none at all. A Native American man in the audience complained we could not solve the problems in our relationship with nature until we solved the problem of dominance and rank. I said we followed the pathway of the chimp with chest-thumping, ground-drumming, bullying, assault, and mutilation as very old habits in the primate line. That doesn't mean this is the only path we follow through the genetic undergrowth. Bonobos, with whom we also share a common ancestor, resolve their conflicts by diffusing hostility with sexual play. They're mutualists. I am a psi-animist, I concluded, the word bubbling up from nowhere, from the same old mind that split from apes. The audience laughed. No one needed a definition for the cobbled word, a bubble like that in everyone's head. What I meant was that I thought science could return us to an animistic sense of the natural world, a place where transformation was expected, part of the pattern and flow. I'm not sure when I began to notice the absence of birds. Certainly not when I checked into the Los Angeles Biltmore, craning at the sky-high, tropical, fool-the-eye mural depicting split-leaf philodendrons and birds of paradise. Not when I walked up Bunker Hill to admire the glint and curve of Frank Gehry's Disney Concert Hall. But now that I think back, not a pigeon or sparrow bothered me for crumbs when I sat in the patio to enjoy my coffee and scone. Not a feathery rustle passed over my head when I walked back on the overpass, stopping to study the parking lot below. Movie paraphernalia had caught my eye. 4 silver Range Rovers, 8 black limos, coil after coil of electrical wire, rows of Klieg lights, tripod stands, first aid van, trailers for the stars to change their clothes. All lined up and waiting for action, not a soul in sight. Later at the Getty Museum, archaic leaf and shell prints marked the travertine, but not one dime-sized splatter of limey shit appeared anywhere on the billion-dollar campus. And the LA Weekly offered discount coupons for removal of crow's feet. There had not even been any dogs. Unlike Prague, where I'd seen a wolf on the tram, its off-duty muzzle hanging loosely like a necklace, or New York City, where professional dog walkers gather a dozen clients from Upper West Side apartments, experienced urban dogs who can walk a mile, held like a bouquet in the dog walker's hand and never tangle their leashes. In Los Angeles, I saw a brown bear on a billboard, a California bank promoting the animal that had been absent from the California landscape since 1922. The loss made elegy when Ursus californicus became the state animal in 1953. By this time, I was ravenous. I walked down Grand Avenue to the Water Grill, more empty limos, waiting for more stars, white Hummer long as a bus, 2 black stretch Lincolns. I cracked the restaurant's door, the place buzzing with celebrity and desire. I snaked through the crowd to sit at the bar, ordered a Grey Goose martini, and watched the barman open oysters with one flit of the knife. He knew how to keep everyone happy. Champagne for the fledgling lovers sitting beside me, though they already were blasted. The woman spinning on her bar stool as she laughed and flung her hair, seductive as a pirouetting sandhill crane. Conversation for the middle-aged lesbians down the line who murmured like wood ducks floating on a calm sea. Benign neglect for the woman sitting alone, nursing her vodka and writing in a notebook, chicken scratch made hastily in the semi-dark bar. First time, the woman hit me with her hair. I startled, as if she'd spilled my cocktail. Young, perhaps Indonesian with curry-colored skin, dressed in saffron and coral brocade, tight as reptile skin, she was wrapped in the gaze of her companion. He was young, though older than the woman, skinny and white. His shirt was unbuttoned in that 70s way, nearly to his belly. I thought of Mark Wahlberg when he played the porn star in Boogie Nights. I thought of his impressive, though pathetically fake member. The woman had long, expensive hair, dyed in a weave of brunette, strawberry blonde, and platinum strands. It was thick hair and heavy with product. I began to think she aspired to the screen, and he was making promises. They fed oysters to each other, tipping the shells so that the milky flesh would slide through the portals of one another's lips. They twined forearms to sip champagne while staring into the oil wells of each other's eyes. It was a parody of love, a B-movie of love, a staged reading of love's stale and empty lines, big, fat oysters, narrow flutes of champagne. The more drunk they got, the more their outsized laughter spread like a toxic spill. The close-cropped women down the bar asked about the oysters. Are they farmed? The barman said, no, they're wild. Paused a beat. Well, they're grown on strings that hang in the ocean. I mean, they are in the ocean, so when you say farmed, I think confined. I ordered the farm-raised sturgeon. Then the hair, again, whipped across my shoulder, the acolyte spinning away from her companion, flinging her hair like a commercial for shampoo, yet oblivious to anything except her connection to the unbuttoned man. I said nothing, except to myself, to whom I repeated, if she hits me one more time with her hair. And she did. After which, I again did nothing, but watched the oyster slide from the man's shell into her pretty pink mouth, the little sea thing released from its briny transsexual life. That's a natural history fact. They're transsexual oysters. From its briny transsexual life, down it went into her red throat, the creature whole and alive, gills, gonads, three-chambered minuscule heart, and lacy black mantle, a few grains of grit and nacre. It was like watching something I remembered from another life. Not the sex of it, but the animal appetite. Life, taking life into its savoring throat. It was like watching myself swinging in the trees, flying through the clatter of monkeys, macaws, and operatic frogs. The old music of earth, savage, joyful, and lost. You gotta look hard in LA. You gotta look hard. All right, I'm gonna read a few poems. I think I've had a great, I've seen a lot of berries since I've been in Montana, so berries must be a big thing. You have wild berries, a lot of wild berries up here. I'll read a few poems from Genius Loci and then a few new poems. This is a series of poems called Wild Fruit, and I go up to a little island in the Bay of Fundy called Grand Banana. I've been going there since I was a little kid. And, there's a great season of berries starting with the little wild strawberries all the way through, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, gooseberries, blackberries, and it's one of my favorite things to go out and pick them and eat them and make jam. So I'm going to probably read, I guess I'll read probably 2 or 3 of these berries. The series is called Wild Fruit, and it has an epigraph from the 1 Corinthians that says, "But take heed, lest by any means this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to them that are weak." If you want raspberries, level an acre of forest, and leave the lot a mess of bleaching brush. The brambles will crawl out of the rubble as if to compensate the land for its grievous loss. To pick the berries, you must walk knee-deep in deadfalls, waist-high in thorns, and compete with yellow jackets. You must inch your way into thickets, crushing a path through the canes, throwing off the green beetle and white spider that rise in your bucket like stones in a farmer's field. And when you are done backtracking through your own destruction, you will step free of the uncertain ground and walk happily, perhaps through a meadow of ferns, to come home, lay ice on the bee stings, and savor in small handfuls the healing taste of the wild. And then the blueberries. I used to say, how we have all these measures of when the place we love is lost. I used to say, well, as long as there's blueberries on Beach Hill, Grand Banana isn't lost. Well, now there's a mansion on Beach Hill, but I have the poem. Most of the blueberry patches are gone. Roads widened, backlots plowed, ridges claimed. On Beach Hill, they subsist on the skin of soil covering bedrock. At the summit, stone breaking through like bone on a wounded elbow. The bushes lie low, and it is a mystery why such scrawny plants are not overtaken by scrub of alder and spruce. Perhaps their taste for acid ground is more refined. But where they find the ingredients to make their version of the color blue, or the flavor that could remind a monk of sex, these are questions for which I want no answers. I'll read you a slightly longer poem. I'm really interested in the figure of the Sonequa, the Kwakiutl figure of the wild woman of the woods. There's a great figure of her in the Field Museum in Chicago, and you'll see stuff if you probably go up to Seattle. She's one of these great mythological figures that comes from that part of the country. She was used as a cautionary tale, to the kids. Don't go outside the bounds of the village because the wild woman of the woods is out there and she'll eat you. And But I was just extremely interested in her. I mean, she kind of, by legend, went out there because she just couldn't take progress anymore, whatever it was in traditional Kwakiutl culture. She couldn't take anymore. Dear blessed woman, thank goodness she isn't here today. So I thought, well, what if we had a contemporary wild woman of the woods? So this is a sort of ridiculous idea that I took quite seriously. Wild woman of the woods. First, I let the vines grow over my door, stopped opening the suitcase full of lies, progress in 1,000 glossy shades of appetite, making me think I need this need, always the fiction, the body rights, always the need, finding an address in the flesh, driving me through the city like a whale through krill. I wandered, spending more and more time in the woods where hunger was real, chance protecting some lives and turning some to food. I wanted to be no more safe, no more damaging than creatures, to be their equal. I gave up cutting back on green's profusion, wanted to be in beauty and of it, to be lush and bend like wood around a wound or obstacle, as ancient trees take into their flesh the slash of lightning strike, the bullet's sudden insult or barbed wire's slow one, violence subsumed in growth, an incident in an otherwise metabolically balanced life. Once in that other life, houseled and clean, I read that whales in their evolutionary history had been terrestrial but changed to live in the sea because that's what life asked of them. I'm not sure what life is asking of me. I hear the house-happy women whisper and jeer. She will steal your children and eat them for supper. Look how the wind whistles through her lips, her hair a nest for spiders. She will steal your soul and make you wild. I'm not sure what it means to lose your way home and start seeing the wild as a force that can enter at will and remake you. Life, what earth does through you, and it can change its mind any day. Yes, I was lonely, hungry, and cold. I slept on dried moss and pine needles, making what bedding and bowls I needed when I needed them, and leaving them behind when I did not. What days meant to me were joy and grief, watching a guileless rabbit nibble on grass, then piercing it for roasting. I wept watching flocks of starlings whirl, herds of elk feed upon the grasslands, communal bats spilling from caves at dusk to feed on insects riding the Aeolian. But when I came alone to the watering places, the creatures fled, knowing I was not their kin. Some nights I crept near parking lots bordering malls and movies, crouched in leafy cover to eavesdrop on couples whose conversation was so casual, as if it were nothing for one to say to another, "Well, what do you think of that?" Or for a man, thinking no one was watching, furtive and fast as a rat, to press a woman against the side of his car. I could have been as sure with my need if I had believed it would do no harm. My idea of wildness became more quiet, encompassing the forest's slow-growing entanglements. No longer mustangs, cougars, and bears, but wild oaks, wolf lichen and moss, the ground in process of penetration and repair. After I memorized the paths of 100 stars, dying was easy. like becoming diluted in forest mist. One day, I got lost in a fog so thick I could no longer tell where my body ended and the space surrounding it began. And a couple of three newer poems, I guess. I'm finishing up a new book. It's really close, really close. Some of these poems, so they're all over the place. Some of these poems I wrote when I was at the Andrews Experimental Forest in Oregon. I'll read two of those, and then a Montana poem. Forest time. When I was in the Andrews, I was out walking around with the scientists there, and I was just so interested in their language, and the geologist who was showing me around. Some of you may know him, Fred Swanson, a great guy of the Northwest, and he was giving me all this terminology. It was, so marvelous to read the landscape that way. Forest time. Forest Road 1510 curves up the flank of Buck Mountain into the zone of mist. Road canted like a shelf fungus, though no roots hold it in place. Mountain works at softening its sides. Wind throw, cut slope slide, hill slope slide, slump, gully, and earth flow, its tools. Workday, 10 million years long. The web. Some of you might have seen this in Orion recently. And it's got a lot of sciencey stuff that I learned while I was up there. It was quite wonderful. And then the last few lines are actually a quote from Claude Levi-Strauss from his marvelous account of his expedition into Brazil, which equally applies to this desire we have to feel, a unity out there. The web. Is it possible there is a certain kind of beauty, as large as the trees, that survive the 500-year fire, the 50-year flood? Trees we can't comprehend, even standing beside them with outstretched arms to gauge their span. A certain kind of beauty so strong, so deeply concealed in relationship, black truffle to red-backed vole, to spotted owl, to Douglas fir, bats and gnats, beetles and moss, flying squirrel, and the high rise of a snag, each needing and feeding the other. A conversation so quiet, the human world can vanish into it. A beauty moves in such a place like snowmelt, sieving through the fungal mats that underlie and interlace the giant firs, tunneling under streams where cutthroat fry live a meter deep in gravel, fluming downstream over rocks that have a hold on place lasting longer than most nations, sluicing under deadfall spanners that rise and float to let floodwaters pass, a beauty that fills the space of the forest with music that can erupt as varied thrush or warbler, calypso orchid or stream violet. Forest, a conversation, not an argument. A beauty gathering such clarity and force, it breaks the mind's fearful hold on its little moment, steeping it in a more dense intelligibility within which centuries and distances answer each other and speak at last with one and the same voice. Okay. I won't tell you who this poem is written for, but it's written for somebody who lives in your community. I don't think he's here. It's called Pegasus in Montana. Well, I'll end with this poem. Once I hiked with this man in the Santa Rita Mountains south of Tucson. We'd gotten so high on the Josephine saddle that a red-tailed hawk flew under us, edging the trail, then climbed the airspace above, coasting like a frisbee right over our heads. The burnt sienna of his wings lit through with golden sun, quiet as the air itself. It seemed nothing but wings, though we felt its eyes on us, just a curiosity in a place where people rarely walked. Years later, we walked on the campus in Missoula. Autumn and colors gone from the burnt grass hills, my friend wearing his green Woolrich shirt and telling me he hoped to get an elk, had a tag. Was that the phrase to say it was legal for him to kill one, to put in the freezer for his family? All this is a digression from the story I meant to tell, an incident he recounted, one that seems so inscrutable to us who are easy with the brute fact that life gives life, that hunters occupy every niche on earth, raccoon dissecting crab, osprey dive bombing mackerel, red tail ripping pocket gophers from their busy work, and all that our kind has taken, keeps taking, the depth of grief we feel, knowing what's lost. But it was the deer I meant to give to this story. I can't follow their trail. How many was it? 5, 6, 7, lost in Missoula? They entered the parking lot, the concrete ramp cool and shadowed like a forest. Did it draw them in with its darkness? They mounted the slope, climbed and climbed in the night, past the oily slots that cars would fill in the morning. They climbed so far, then no one can say why. They leapt. Why each followed the others, the grace of its leap, like Pegasus, calling the band to fly together those seconds before gravity pulled them back, each deer falling to the unforgiving ground. This story is about friendship and grief, how the man's eyes held on to me like the hawk's. No, like a man's, the sweetness of a gaze that asks, do you understand the grief of the world? Thank you.